Let's see if there's one or two could just be shouted out. I was going to get you to keep them in mind, but let's hear if there were. Did anybody talk about money? Yes. Okay, yeah. So you can spend it, and the sort of spend it wisely. There you go. Yeah. Anything else? Any benefits? Yeah. You can give it to the church. For those that don't know, that was the church treasurer. Yeah. Any dangers come to mind, or any consumerism? Yeah. Yeah. Gambling? Yep. Brilliant. Keep that in mind. That's going to come up on the way through. Yeah, lots of things. As I say, for those that have not been around during the previous series, we're running a series in Proverbs. Since we got to Christmas, we're now looking at different topics that crop up in the book and tend to bit scattergun, sort of grabbing some proverbs from here and there. So we're going to think a little bit about money and wealth today, following on from looking or considering work last week. Here's just a few stats for you. 23-year-old on the minimum wage is likely to earn around about £19,000 at the moment. What have I got here? I've got nurses, and again, these are all average, and there's a difference in there. But apparently, in terms of my quick look, a nurse in London might be looking at about £37,000 per year. A couple of thousand, maybe London waiting. But again, there's a bracket either side of that, maybe below and above. Teachers. Similarly, £30,000 in England. Again, there's a range of adding on to that before you add on responsibilities and so on. The average UK salary, apparently, from a quick Google, is £35,000. Does anybody know how much Marcus Rashford was reportedly fined? 2 weeks' wages were lost because he was out drinking when he shouldn't have been. Anyone seen that? £500,000? £650,000 was a 2-week fine. I worked out this morning, it was early and I am tired, but I worked out with my calculator for those on the average UK salary of £35,000. In fact, let's ask Richard, how many years to make £650,000? 18. Pretty close. 18 years working at a full UK salary, or 35,000 UK salary, to earn the equivalent of a 2-week fine for a Premier League footballer. Debt. Individual debt, apparently in the UK at the moment, stands at £1,847.6 billion as of November 2023. Again, this was a quick Google, but 1.3 million apparently unemployed at the moment, and repossessions of homes, 2,230 in 2023, more than doubling apparently in 2024, 4,860, and then potentially 6,000 in 2025, depending on what happens with the economy. So there's just some sort of facts and figures. And of course, there are lives of many, many people caught up in all of that, in a fairly mad system, really, when footballers are earning that kind of money and people working and slogging away in our hospitals earn such a tiny amount in comparison. It's a mad place. But let's just think this morning about money or wealth can be a blessing. We see that in Proverbs. It can be a great danger. We're probably going to see a fair bit of that this morning, and then try and end with a little bit of wisdom from Proverbs. Let's just have the first slide up, if it's not up there already. There's a few Proverbs, 5 I think, on this sort of observation of what wealth and money can bring. I'll let you just run your eyes over those. The top one there is that sometimes a little bit of a surprise. I think particularly when you're aware of the New Testament verse that talks about the love of money being the root of all kinds of evil, you sort of can assume, I think, from that observation, and again, one that I'm sure we would know to be 100% true, sometimes a bit of a surprise to read Proverbs 10:22, that the blessing of the Lord brings wealth, sometimes without painful toil for it. But we do see in the Old Testament, in terms of the way Israel was spoken to by Moses on the way to the Promised Land, that there were blessings and there are curses. Obedience to God would bring blessings, running after other gods, forsaking the Lord would bring curses and difficulties and so on. And part of his blessing there in the Old Testament for the people of Israel, as they walk in dependence upon him and obedience to him, is that the crops grow, the livestock multiply, wealth is sort of generated. It is part of his blessing. And so from that first proverb, it's absolutely right, isn't it, that we acknowledge God in our lives in terms of what we have and the blessings that he's given to us, and thank him for perhaps our job or our income, or the wealth that we have. It comes from his hand. Usually, and this is why it's interesting that money follows on from the subject of work. We saw last week in Proverbs that it's his blessing tends to come to us via our hard work. He gives us breath, he sustains us, he gives us opportunity, he gives us skills, the ability to work hard and earn money. And that's sort of a great sort of emphasis in the book of Proverbs, that's the way in which we gain sort of income and wealth and so on from hard work. There's lots of Proverbs that I've not gone to today because we would be here all day, that warn about things like dishonest scales, sort of fiddling with the weight on the scale so that, the amount of grain is not actually what the weight is there. You're making money in a way that you shouldn't be doing. Proverbs speaks about dishonest money. The second proverb up there was up last week on the subject of work and how hard work brings an abundance or brings profit, we said last week. But the warning there was about those that chase fantasies. And I think last week I'd got in my mind those that sort of sit there sort of dreaming, the mere talker that we saw last week. But again, I've drilled down a little bit more into that word, fantasies. And I mentioned last week the big thick commentary that Susan had recommended. It says this on this word. It says, in view are ventures or gambles that do not involve hard work, broad enough to include any get-rich-quick schemes or waiting for one ship to come in. So sort of Williams hit the nail on the head on this. This is sort of, rather than pursuing hard work, using the skills, abilities God has given to us and working hard in order to sort of be paid and have food on the table. It's sort of this sort of fantasy, this sort of get-rich-quick scheme. I've been in the car a lot more over the last couple of weeks than I usually am, and Absolute Radio's been churning out some great songs from across the decades. Other channels are available. But every 5 minutes, make me a winner. I mean, I don't know if you listen to any of this stuff. Make me a winner. Just send your £2 text off, and it climbs every day at £126,000. All you've got to do is pick up your phone and say, make me a winner. Of course, again, I've not looked into the statistics of the amount of money that's ploughed in by people across the country on a get-rich-quick scheme. Proverbs warns about that. The bottom three Proverbs on the screen behind me are sort of observations. You get Proverbs like this, where the writer Solomon is not particularly making a kind of a value judgment about things, but he's observing. So he observes that the wealth of the rich is their fortified city, but poverty is the ruin of the poor. And I guess we can see that. I think, I guess I'm not alone. You can see that, can't you, in terms of the last few years, cost of living crisis, gas, electricity bills going through the roof, mortgages perhaps coming off a fixed rate and going sky high, food prices being hiked up. There are some in our country, probably many in our country, who almost have not noticed that. Their wealth is like a fortified city. I sort of picture your Lord of the Rings or the attack on Hogwarts at the end of the final book, and the army's coming, but there is a level of sort of fortification, of protection. McGonagall in the film sort of puts that sort of dome across of protection, and that's the sort of image that Proverbs uses for those that have wealth. Their wealth, it can be like a fortified city. There's an element of protection there. And of course, we have the absolute scale, as we saw in those figures at the beginning, of those that perhaps wouldn't even know personally that there's a cost of living crisis going on, to those that can't put food on the table, that are losing their homes. One of my friends in a church in the past lost his home. It affected him and still affects him for his entire life. But the wealth of the rich, says Solomon, is like a fortified city, but poverty is ruin to some. They also observe that sometimes, generally, again, a lot of these proverbs are general, but the poor can be shunned even by their neighbours. But Solomon looks around and sees that the rich appear to have many friends. All our adverts that are advertising this, that and the other that involve sort of wealth or money, there's always a crowd of people. They're always having a drink. They're always having a great time. That's what Solomon observes. He also observes at the bottom there that a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. So the wealth or money that we have can be used, as I think others have said here already this morning, to refresh others, to help others, to be generous, to give it to others. That refreshes them and can refresh the giver. So wealth is not, we shouldn't write wealth off as an evil. The blessing of the Lord brings wealth. We should thank God for what we have. It can provide a degree of protection in life, like a fortified city. It can bring connections with others. It can enable generosity that can bless others. But on the next slide, perhaps what you would expect to be coming this morning, wealth can be a deceptive idol. And some of the proverbs on this are very, very strong. Those who trust in their riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf. I just sort of noticed yesterday, we went up to London yesterday to see an exhibition of illustrators' work, which was sort of, children's book type illustration, which was amazing to see what was being produced and the levels of skills and so on. But equally amazing driving there was amazing beginning to see trees coming into leaf and the colour beginning to return and just the beauty of that whole thing. So again, Proverbs strikes it gold again here with its imagery. Those that trust in their riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf. And what's coming into view here is idolatry, what the Bible calls idolatry. Idolatry essentially is a God substitute, something that appears to represent him and take his place. So at times in human history, we will build our own idols. Isaiah loves to ridicule this, how the carpenter will use some wood to fashion this sort of godlike idol that we will then worship and bow down to and believe provides all that we need. And the rest of the wood's used to keep the fire going. Isaiah has a good laugh about us doing that sort of thing. But an idol is something that's there as a substitute for God, something that we will trust in instead of him. Trust it for our security. Trust it for our comfort. Trust it to bless us. Trust it to bring us pleasure. The righteous, according to this proverb, trust in the Lord, not in their riches. They thank God for his blessing, but they do not worship and trust the blessing. As we saw in Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Now, of course, money can help for a time. But again, the note in Proverbs is that it's so uncertain, as we'll see in a moment. And many, including my friend, learnt this lesson in the financial crash of 2008 and those before it. Or when a job is lost or comes to an end, or when a mortgage can't be paid or rent afforded, when debt spirals, money suddenly is nowhere to be seen. Our Saviour has disappeared. And so the Proverbs in 23, 4 and 5 says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches and they're gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Only needs, doesn't it, as we saw when we were in Australia, a time of drought or flood or sort of pestilence, and a crop can be wiped out and your wealth is gone and you have no means to put food on the table. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy and thieves do not break in and steal." And Jesus warns then that where your treasure is, there your heart is also. I wonder if you've heard wealth's whisper. If you listen very carefully, and again, Proverbs wants us to go away and mull on these things. Have you ever heard the voice of wealth whispering, "I can keep you safe. I will protect you. I am your fortified city. I am your rock. I am your refuge, your very great help in times of trouble. I will give you security. I am your gateway to fun and to pleasure, to the blessings of life. I will give you status. You'll be seen as a success in the eyes of others." Money says, "Give me your heart. I will not let you down. I will never leave you nor forsake you." Except, of course, it does. It talks and it behaves actually like it's God. But it's not. It's impersonal. It's incapable of knowing you. It's actually therefore incapable of actually caring for you. If circumstances take it away, it won't shed a tear for you or mount some kind of rescue to save you. It won't take human form and take up its cross and willingly pay the debt that you owe. And when we pass, which is a more morbid sort of thought, isn't it, in one way, when we pass from this life into judgment, where will our wealth be then? The Egyptian pharaohs famously buried with all their treasure only to discover the truth of Proverbs 11 verse 4, which I think is on the wall behind me, that wealth is in fact worthless in the day of wrath or on the day of judgment. But righteousness delivers from death. On the day when God sends his judge back, and we stand before Jesus Christ, the appointed judge. In the book of Acts, chapter 17, we're told that God has given proof of that day by raising him from the dead. So his resurrection is the guarantee that we will stand before him on that day. And on that day, it won't matter, will it, whether it was £19,000 on minimum wage or £35,000 as the average UK salary, or a teacher's salary with a bit of London waiting, or even whether we've earned £650,000 every 2 weeks. All of that will be of no consequence. The size of our house or lack of house will be of no consequence on that day. The simple question on that day will be, are you righteous? Because righteousness, unlike wealth, according to this proverb, is what delivers us from death. And the bad news of Romans tells us that no one is righteous, not even one. And the good news of the Bible and the story of Jesus is that we are gifted righteousness by the generosity of another. So wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness will deliver us from death. And therefore, if we just go to, I think it's the almost penultimate slide as we move towards a conclusion, I think these verses in chapter 38 and 9 have a huge amount of wisdom in them. All of the Proverbs have wisdom in them, but this one is interesting. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. I don't know about you, but I must have at some point read that proverb before, but the give me my daily bread just leapt out at me this week, of course, from the Lord's Prayer. You can see, can't you, the twin sort of dangers, or the twofold danger in this proverb. Don't give me too much. If I have too much, I may disown you. I may begin to trust in my fortified city and say, who is the Lord? Who needs the Lord? But if I have too little, I may be tempted to steal or to fix the weights or to go out on a gamble. Two dangers. Jesus, of course, said very famously, no one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Those who trust in their riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf, nourished, prosperous, alive. In fact, Proverbs 15:16, better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Interesting, isn't it? Wealth is a gift. As we saw at the beginning, it's a blessing. But it can be very, very dangerous. And so I just wanted to finish really with two brief passages from the New Testament. I think to pray, Lord, give me my daily bread, and to be aware of the dangers on either side. But two things to aim for to finish. To aim for contentment, which I guess is in that prayer, isn't it? To give me my daily bread. This is what Paul wrote to the Philippian church, chapter 4, verse 12. I think, there you go, Brill. Dave's very good, isn't he? Paul says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. So either side of that spectrum. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I think that's a great example for us, isn't it, to go away and mull on, that Paul had times when he had plenty. He thanked God for what he had. There were times when he had very little. There were challenges at both ends. If any of you are jotting anything down, go away and read James 1, because James actually says there that we find many trials in life, and he speaks about Christians in humble circumstances who have little, and he speaks about Christians that have much. And he says there are temptations attached to both, and then gives wisdom. So do have a look at James 1, but praying for contentment, learning that secret of contentment is something that the Apostle Paul had to do, presumably because he learned it. It took time, and he needed the strength of God to learn that lesson. And I think, again, I just wanted to say for us to go away and mull on this, I think money has got a bigger grip probably on all of us in this room than we realise. It could be easy to have very lovely tea and coffee, which is coming up shortly, more refreshments than you've ever seen coming out that hatch, and to go home thinking, money, tick, we've done that one. Anger next week. But can we really tick it? Idols tend to be very deceptive. The greatest trick any idol can do is to convince you that it's not a problem for you. So we've got to think about that sort of contentment and bear in mind these Proverbs. The other thing, and this may tell us, coming back to our church treasurer, this may tell us something about how we're doing. Because the other thing on the final slide to aim for is generosity. A couple more Proverbs, 11:25. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. And we can be generous, I think, with whatever we have. Marcus Rashford has a wonderful opportunity to be generous, but we shouldn't look at him, should we, and think, well, he can be generous, but I can't. I haven't got £650,000 every 2 weeks. But generosity, I think, is an attitude, isn't it, of heart. It's acknowledging that God has given what he's given, and how can I be generous with what he has entrusted to me to bless other people with. So this is what Paul, who was learning that secret of contentment, said to Timothy at the very end. So Timothy was a pastor, an elder in Ephesus, and Paul tells him in the final paragraph really of the letter, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. I think he's read the book of Proverbs. But put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Wealth is a blessing. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. And in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So go back over these slides. I've seen a few people taking pictures. Ponder these proverbs. Open your heart before the Lord. How are we doing in light of them? What am I living for? You know, we're going through school, heading to college, thinking job, what's the future? What's the hope? Is it the big bank balance? Is it that amassing of wealth? Is it the house? Is it the holidays? What is it? What is our heart captivated by? So let's learn from Proverbs. Let's seek contentment. Let's seek generosity. And the final verse for this morning, I don't think it's on the slide behind. Paul says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. That's the sort of grid, isn't it, with which we think about our wealth and what we have. He laid his riches aside. He became poor, so that through that poverty of his existence, his cross, his resurrection, we might be unbelievably rich in him.